Neat fight at bantamweight. We have a couple of prospects looking to really capitalize on a big fight, well, against their respective opponents. We have Hawaii's Kevin Natividad making his second time out. Quicksand, he's going to be taking on Danaa Storm. And listen, Storm is an interesting nickname for him because sometimes, just like the weather in the Maritimes, you could end up with snow. Sometimes you get rain. Sometimes you get a hot, sunny day. But for Storm Bakary, you look at his debut and he took on Aoriqileng, and he didn't look all that good. He kind of got caught in the mirror. He looked really square. He got hit on the left side over and over and over again. And overall, he just got outclassed. So he came out, took some time off, and he ended up fighting Guido Connelly last year. And what do we know about Guido Connelly? Kind of a jack of all trades, but not really good at any of them. And if you go back and watch that fight, Bakary looked amazing in that one. He really did. I mean, he ultimately ends up getting the first round finish. For Kevin Natividad, made his UFC debut on incredibly short notice. It was about 6 days notice, and he had just fought a week before with LFA in a main event. He was taking on Kyle Estrada, finished him in that fight. It was great shovel hook, right up, straight up. And he looked amazing in that one. And the one thing for Kevin Natividad that you hear fight and fight and fight again is that he's super heavy on his lead leg. And if anybody was a good kicker, they'd take advantage of it. He's had 11 pro fights. He's lost twice. And he didn't really get kicked a whole lot in the lead leg by Miles Johns. So, hey, maybe Bakary Danaa is going to be the guy that figures it out. Eventually, somebody will. But we have a really interesting fight between a couple of guys that are very well-rounded. If you look at it for Bakary Danaa, he trains primarily at a Jackson Wink. The past week or so, he's been at Extreme Couture, getting in some rounds in Vegas for this one. Ultimately, the fight is in Jacksonville. And for Kevin Natividad, coming out of Arizona Combat Sport, we've seen he has a decent wrestling pedigree. He has really, really quick hands, and he can box. And he can ultimately get in a firefight. We had this one circled as a possible fight of the night. I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
This is going to be a very exciting fight. Now, I also have to be very honest. I could see maybe a tiny little percent of the world where this isn't a good fight, where we do have two guys who will kind of look in the mirror, because that's the thing about Danaa Batgerel. His two fights that we have seen from him, he reminds me a little bit of Dwight Grant, where we've seen these versions of Dwight Grant where you're like, wow, could he be champion one day? And then you've seen other versions of Dwight Grant where it's like, did my TV freeze? Because he hasn't really done anything. And that is the interesting thing for Batgerel, because the version of him where he is very active and he is letting his hands go, well, okay, we're dealing with a rangy striker with really good power, good cardio, good output. I like all of those things. And against Natividad, this will be interesting, because I do think Natividad's the more likely of the two to shoot a takedown at some point in this fight. But for me, it's going to come down to, when does he feel comfortable enough to start shooting those takedowns? Because I think we're dealing with two guys who have good cardio, but if they do get pushed, I think either guy could really make the other one really tired and be able to weaponize their cardio and their pace in that third round. Because if Bakary can make this a stand-up fight where he's defending a lot of takedowns in open space, he is backing up, and not just backing up straight. That's an issue too. If Natividad's able to just let his combinations go and then mix in his wrestling, I know I always bring up Frankie Edgar, but he's the first guy who I think of. If he really is able to mix in his hands with his wrestling, it's going to be a tough night for Bakary. And the thing about Danaa Batgerel is, if he is defending a lot of takedowns, and if Natividad's starting to become successful with his takedown attempts, those hands of Danaa are going to drop a little bit more and a little bit more every single time. That is something that Natividad might be able to capitalize on later on in this fight. I really do think that his takedowns, maybe not for takedown's sake, I would use my takedowns to really set up my striking, because if he really is making Danaa Batgerel really just think constantly. Think about the takedown attempt. Then think about the strikes. Don't just let Bakary be comfortable in space, because if he is comfortable in space, I do think he'll be the more successful of these two fighters.
It's a really interesting clash of styles, really. And I mean, that's the thing for Bakary Danaa. You can tell why you would go to Jackson Wink. You're going to get to work your boxing with Brandon Gibson. But then you go over and you look at the fighters that he's training with. Let's go over the whole period of time, because before the fight against Connelly, I went back and watched, and I went back and looked through the Instagram. It was Aaron Pico, who was at Jackson Wink at the time. It was Patchy Mix, who's super on the outs with Jackson Wink right now, so you don't want to even mention the gym around him, but that's somebody that's great to train around, especially when you're getting ready for a fight with a guy like Kevin Natividad. Now again, that was for the Connelly fight. That was a while ago. But the skills that you learn there, you're still going to keep with you. It's a lifelong game, this martial arts. And for Kevin Natividad, it is interesting taking on a guy that can strike, that can most likely defend some of the takedowns. The guys that Bacary's been with lately, I wrote it down, Steve Garcia and Damon Blackshear. And you might think, oh, okay, that's a neat name. The first MMA event I ever covered, Damon Blackshear was in the main event. So it's been a while. With NEF, it was kind of crazy. I saw that name pop up. I looked, I thought, is that him? Yeah, it was. So kind of cool. But yeah, it is a really interesting fight. And I was surprised, Matt, when I looked at the odds. Batgerel Danaa open a -150 favorite. He's -172 right now. For Kevin Natividad, open a +130. He's now at a +141. Have not looked at these Tapology votes. Yowzas. 876 total votes, 77% going with Batgerel to get the win, 58% by decision, 36% by knockout. For the 23% that have Natividad, 69% by decision. Again, if you look at Kevin Natividad's overall body of work, he did beat Tom Nee back in 2018 by decision, but apart from that, there are plenty of knockout wins on his record. And for Batgerel Danaa, if we go through the record just quickly, there is a number of decisions, but he can get the submission. He didn't really fight the highest level competition coming into the UFC, so it was very difficult to try and know what you have. But we have seen him in 2 different fights. It has been a tale of 2 fighters. For me, I wouldn't be overly confident to pick either way, to be totally honest with you.
No, I'm ever so slightly going to pick Batgerel Danaa, but unlike the Tapology voters, I'm not that confident in it. Now, I think he will be able to defend the few takedown attempts that he will see, and I do think he's the more comfortable of the 2 strikers, so if this fight is taking place at range, I do think he'll be the one scoring at a slightly higher output, but again, I'm kind of siding with you. I'm not as confident as those Tapology votes might suggest.
Yeah, I do have a hard time with this one. For Kevin Natividad, it's a lot of long, lunging shots. He gets caught up the middle. He gets struck up the middle quite a bit. And if you want to go back, it's not just the Miles Johns fight, because again, he did get caught by that uppercut as he was like lunging back, and then he just kind of laid down and didn't get back up. Hey, sleepyhead,
shot.
It's time. The fight's over, buddy. But it was a really good shot. And in that fight, kind of started to slow. Now, again, it was 6 days notice, and he just fought like 7 days beforehand or 11 days before.
Exactly. I don't think he has bad cardio, and I don't think that first fight from Natividad is the best showcase of what Kevin Natividad really can do in the cage. So I guess that might be why the odds where they are, but yeah, I still am picking Danaa Batgerel.
I'm going to go with Kevin Natividad.
Really?
I think if he pushes a nice pace, again, we saw Danaa Batgerel really start to land some of those hooks, really start to land on Guido Connelly, and Guido was backing up. Oh, old Guido.
Poor Guido.
Yeah, we just never got to see enough of Guido. And he got kind of old, and then he lost the Batgerel Danaa, and then we never really saw him again. But I will ever so slightly side with Natividad, because I think it's just going to be the constant pressure. The pressure. And coming in on short notice and, well, losing 2 rounds against Miles Johns and getting finished in the 3rd, sometimes that's going to happen. Miles Johns, not really known as a cardio king either, but we'll see how this fight plays out. It is a really tricky one. Make sure you tune in to Question Mark Kicks. We get to see both these guys weigh in, face off. Maybe it'll be a difference of the pick, because like we said, neither one of us overly confident with it. So let us know down below in the comments section who you're going with and why. I'm going Natividad right now. You're going with Batgerel Danaa, but absolutely love the fight, because it is a potential fight of the night. Love this card. 3 title fights up the top. UFC 261. Full of bangers in Jacksonville. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.